The hallway of Northwestern Memorial Hospital smelled of bleach and a quiet desperation. It was the same sterile scent as every hospital I'd ever been in, a smell that promised clean surfaces but hid dirty truths. My husband, Frank, stood beside me, his large frame looking out of place in the narrow hall. In his hand, he held a spiral-cut, honey-baked ham, its shiny skin studded with pineapples and wrapped in gold foil. It looked like an artifact from another life, the one we had been living just 3 hours ago when we left Grand Rapids for a surprise Thanksgiving visit. Now we were outside room 304. 1. Riley's room. Her call had been choppy, her voice tight. "Don't come, Mum. Something has happened. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. A mother knows. A quick check of her husband Marcus's Instagram revealed the rest of the story, a surprisingly public post from an hour ago. "Marriage changes people. Is a child too much to ask for?" The location was right there, Northwestern Memorial. I pressed my ear against the cold wood of the door. The muffled sounds inside coalesced into one voice, Marcus's. It wasn't the soft, charming tone he used with us, the one that had convinced my daughter to trade her life in Michigan for his in Chicago. This voice was acid. "You're pathetic," he snapped. "Lying there, crying over a bunch of cells." My mother was right. You're useless if you can't even carry a child. A soft, jagged sob from my daughter. Then another sound. A sharp, wet smack that vibrated through the door. It was the sound of a hand hitting flesh. I didn't think. I acted. Frank saw the look on my face and stepped back. I threw the door open. It slammed against the inside wall, and the scene froze for half a second, a perfect and awful tableau. My daughter, Riley, was half sitting up in the hospital bed, one hand clutching her stomach, the other pressed against a red mark on her cheek. Marcus stood over her, his hand still raised, his handsome face contorted into a mask of contempt. He hadn't seen me yet. His gaze was locked on my daughter. My baby. The ham was a dead weight in Frank's hands. I snatched it from him. It was a dense 10-pound projectile of cured pork. I didn't hesitate. With a guttural roar from deep in my gut, I swung it. It hit Marcus squarely in the chest with a sickening thud. The air whooshed out of his lungs in a surprised gasp. He stumbled backward, tripping over a visitor's chair and collapsing in a heap of expensive clothes and shattered dignity. He stared at me, his eyes wide, a fleck of pineapple stuck to his lapel. "Mom," Riley whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm here, honey." I dropped the ham to the floor and moved to her, fury a searing shield around my aching heart. This was not the man who had proposed to my daughter 1 year ago on the shores of Lake Michigan, quoting poetry and promising to protect her forever. This was a monster. I had felt it in my gut back then, a lingering unease I had dismissed as a mother's reluctance to let go. I would never make that mistake again. "What the heck is wrong with you?" Marcus gasped from the floor, struggling to his feet. Before I could answer, 2 figures appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. A stick-thin woman in a cashmere sweater who reeked of condescension, and a younger, sleeker version of her, clutching a Prada purse like a weapon. Margaret and Lila, Marcus's mother and sister. They ignored Riley completely. "Marcus, darling, what happened?" Margaret rushed to his side, brushing imaginary dust off his jacket. Lila's cold, appraising gaze swept the room. It landed on the ham and then on me. "What is she doing here?" "This is a family matter," Margaret said, turning to me, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "Jan, you shouldn't have come." "I am her family," I said, my voice low and dangerous. I planted myself between them and Riley's bed. "And I saw what your son just did." "You don't understand," Margaret began, the classic line of a manipulator. Marcus is under so much pressure at work. Riley can be so dramatic. That's when Frank filled the doorway. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, his 6'2", 200-pound frame, a tableau of immovable force, a retired military man's body. He crossed his arms over his chest, his gaze as hard as granite. It was a look that had made young men half his age tremble. Margaret and Lila involuntarily took a step back. The air crackled with a new tension. The battle lines were drawn. "Get out!" My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the thick atmosphere of the room. Marcus, still flanked by his mother and sister, sneered. "This is my wife's room. You can't—" "I wasn't asking," I said, stepping toward them. Frank shifted his stance in the doorway, a subtle movement that blocked their exit and promised consequences. "Get out! Right now!" They saw I wasn't bluffing. Margaret shot one last poisonous look at Riley before hustling her children into the hall, muttering about lawsuits and restraining orders. The door clicked shut, leaving us in a sudden, echoing silence. I turned to Riley. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, wrenching sadness. The bright, confident girl I had raised was gone. In her place was this pale, shaking woman with haunted eyes. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at her hands, twisting the thin hospital blanket. "He's not usually like this, Mum," she whispered, the words sounding rehearsed. "He's just stressed." "It's my fault. The doctor said—" "Stop," I said, my voice at its softest. I sat on the edge of her bed and took her hand. It was ice cold. "Nothing you could ever do would justify him hitting you. Nothing." I gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and she flinched, the instinctive reaction of someone used to expecting a blow. Seeing it almost broke me. I saw the faint, yellowish edges of another bruise on her arm, almost hidden by her gown sleeve. It wasn't the first time. At that moment, the door opened again. It was Marcus, alone, this time. He had calmed down, his mask of charming concern back in place. "I need to talk to my wife," he said, staring me down. "She doesn't want to talk to you." "Riley?" he said, ignoring me, his voice softening into a hypnotic coo. "Honey, can you ask your parents to give us a minute? Please. We need to talk." Riley looked from him to me, her face a canvas of fear and indecision. Before I could protest further, Marcus moved with the speed of a snake, leaning over the bed rail to whisper something in her ear. I couldn't hear his words, but I saw their effect. The last trace of color drained from Riley's face. She went rigid, her eyes wide, held in a terror so profound it seemed to suck the air from the room. She looked utterly broken. It wasn't just a threat. It was a kill shot to her soul. She shook her head, barely perceptible. Marcus straightened up, a flash of triumph in his eyes. "We'll talk later," he said, and he was gone. As soon as he left, a dry, heart-wrenching sob escaped Riley's lips. She curled into a ball, shaking uncontrollably. "Riley, honey, what did he say?" I asked, stroking her back. "You can tell me. Whatever it is, we'll fix it." For a long moment, she just cried. Then the words came tumbling out, quiet and filled with shame. "He has things on his phone, videos from when we got married. He said if I ever told you what he was really like, if I ever tried to leave, he'd post them. He said he'd send them to everyone, you and Dad. He'd ruin me." The confession hung in the air, a horrible, suffocating thing. This was his leash. This was how he had turned my daughter into a ghost. He hadn't just hurt her, he'd taken her hostage. I looked at Frank, who was now standing by the window, his back to us. His shoulders were stiff, his hands clenched into fists. He had heard every word. When he finally turned, his face was stone, but I saw the fire in his eyes. We didn't need to speak. 40 years of marriage, of raising a child, of facing the world together, had led to this moment of perfect, unspoken understanding. I turned back to Riley and held her hand, pouring a strength into it that I prayed she could feel. Her tears had subsided into shudders of exhaustion. "Listen to me, Riley," I said, my voice firm and clear. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. The shame is all his, every last bit of it." I waited for her eyes to meet mine. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to rest. And when you're discharged, we're not going back to Michigan." She frowned, confused. "What?" "We're going home," I said, a cold, hard certainty clinging to my chest. "To your home. We're moving in." The drive from the hospital to the apartment was a silent 20-minute ride through Chicago's unforgiving traffic. Frank drove our sturdy Ford Explorer, a Michigan car if there ever was one, which looked like a tank amid a crowd of sleeker, more aggressive vehicles. Riley, small and fragile, sat in the back, watching the city's towering canyons of glass and steel slide by the window. She was a stranger in her own life, and this city, which was supposed to be her great adventure, now seemed like a predator. Marcus's building was in Lincoln Park, a monument to the new upper class, with a cold marble lobby and abstract art that looked like a crime scene. A uniformed doorman, his expression professionally indifferent, gave Riley a nod as we passed. I wondered what he saw, what he heard through the thick walls of this place. The elevator ascended in an unsettling silence, opening directly into their 27th floor apartment. The first thing that hit me was the view, a stunning floor-to-ceiling panorama of the park and lake. It was designed to impress, to proclaim wealth and power. The second thing that hit me was the cold. Not a physical chill, but a frigidness of the soul. The apartment was a showroom, not a home. White leather couches were arranged at perfect, uninviting angles on a grey silk rug. A glass coffee table held a single, artfully placed book that no one had ever read. There were no pictures, no clutter, no life. It looked less like a living room and more like the private mausoleum of a very successful and very lonely man. "You should get into some comfortable clothes, honey," I said to Riley, my voice too loud in the silence. "That hospital gown has had enough action." She nodded, dazed, and led me down a long hallway to the master bedroom. It was more of the same, an acre of grey carpeting, a bed that looked like it belonged in a modern art museum, and more of that stunning, impersonal view. She pointed to some lacquered doors. "My closet's on the left." I opened them and my breath caught. I remembered the 3 closets we had in her room back home, bursting with colour and texture. Riley had always loved fashion, bold patterns, vintage finds, bright scarves. She expressed her joy through her clothes. That joy was gone. Her side of the cavernous walk-in closet was sparsely populated by a collection of drab, shapeless garments in shades of beige, grey, and navy, conservative blouses, boxy pants, formless sweaters. It was the uniform of a woman who had been taught not to be seen. "Riley, where are all your clothes?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh," she looked down, tugging at a loose thread on her hospital bracelet. "Margaret and Lila took me shopping a few months after the wedding. They said my old stuff wasn't appropriate for a married woman, for Marcus's wife." I pulled out a beige cashmere sweater. It was expensive, I could tell, but utterly devoid of personality. It was a costume. "So you just threw everything away?" "They donated it," she said. It was easier than arguing. Then I saw it, the full scope of their campaign. This wasn't just about control, it was about erasure. They had systematically dismantled my daughter, piece by piece, until all that was left was this quiet, compliant stranger. I looked at Marcus's side of the closet, a meticulous and overflowing collection of designer suits, custom shirts, and rows of expensive shoes. The contrast was disgusting. The sound of the front door opening startled us both. Footsteps in the hall. Marcus. And he wasn't alone. I left Riley in the bedroom and went out to the living room. Marcus was standing by the window, his back to me. Margaret was there, directing two men from a high-end grocery delivery service who were unloading bags onto the kitchen island. "Just put the organic produce in the crisper drawer," Margaret was saying in a voice that dripped with condescending authority. "My son needs to watch his diet, especially with all this stress." She saw me, and her smile became a tense, unpleasant line. "Jan, I've brought some essentials. I'm sure you and Frank will want to be comfortable during your brief visit." The insinuation was clear. You are temporary guests. This is still my domain. I crossed my arms. "That's very thoughtful of you, Margaret. But let's get a few things straight. This isn't a visit. We aren't guests." Marcus turned around, his face a thundercloud. "What the heck does that mean?" "It means we're here to oversee our daughter's recovery," I said, planting my feet. I made sure my voice was quiet and firm, letting it fill every corner of that cold, silent room. "And while we're under this roof, there are new rules. Rule number 1, you will speak to Riley only when I or her father are present. Rule number 2, you, Margaret, and your daughter Lila will not enter this apartment without my express permission. Rule number 3, you will treat my daughter with the respect and care she deserves." I took another step closer, lowering my voice so only they could hear the steel in it. "This is not a negotiation. One misstep, one raised voice, one unkind word directed at her. And my next call is not to you. It's to the Chicago police. I'll show them the pictures of her bruises and file a report so fast it'll make your head spin. Do I make myself understood?" Margaret's jaw worked in silent fury, her face pale. Marcus stared at me, his eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. For a moment, I thought he was going to explode, but he saw the absolute certainty on my face. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He had lost control of his golden cage, and now a tiger was guarding the gate. He gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod. "Good," I said, turning my back on them. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go help my daughter find something to wear." The first 24 hours were a silent war of attrition. Marcus confined himself to his home office, the door firmly shut. Margaret, true to my word, didn't show up. It was a temporary, fragile truce, and I had no intention of wasting it. While Marcus was isolated in a series of loud, self-important conference calls, I initiated the next phase of our operation. It started at the sleek, minimalist desk in the corner of the living room, a space Riley had apparently never been allowed to use. "Time to check the books," I said, pulling a chair up for her. She flinched. "Mum, I don't know if I can. He handled all the finances. He said I wasn't good with numbers." "Let's see if that's true," I said, my voice gentle, but with a firmness that left no room for argument. What we found was a methodical, cold-blooded financial strangulation. We started with her personal savings account, the one she'd had since she was a teenager, where she had built up a sizable sum from her old marketing job. It was nearly empty. We watched on screen as a year of steady transfers drained it, moving her money into a joint account and then, almost immediately, out again. Next, the credit cards. He had added her to his premium accounts, a gesture that at the time had seemed generous. The statements told another story. Thousands of dollars spent at exclusive steakhouses that I knew for a fact Riley had never been to. A $5,000 charge at a high-end Italian suit shop. A recurring monthly payment listed only as M services, which a quick Google search revealed was the lease for a high-end luxury car. The Porsche he had claimed his company paid for. He had systematically used her good credit history to finance his own lavish lifestyle, while telling her they needed to be frugal. The real sickness, though, went deeper. In a folder hidden on the shared hard drive, innocuously labeled Home, we discovered the truth about his salary. He had told Riley he was putting a large portion of it into a 401k plan for their future. The statements were there, yes, but they weren't from a retirement fund. They were receipts for Twitch and OnlyFans, thousands of dollars a month gifted to women with names like Kitten Kisses for You. Riley let out a soft whimper of pain. It was the betrayal, the absolute sordid humiliation. He hadn't just taken her money, he had used it to buy the attention of other women while making her feel useless. But the final, irrefutable piece of evidence came from his email, which he had carelessly left logged in. It was a chain between him and Margaret, dated just 2 months earlier. The words chilled me to the bone. Margaret, we need to move forward with the Michigan Trust. Did you get her to sign the power of attorney yet? Her parents can't live forever. Marcus, I'm working on it. She's been difficult lately. I'm constantly telling her she's too sensitive to handle the finances. I'll convince her it's for her own good. I printed out everything. Every bank statement, every credit card bill, every sordid email. I built a thick folder, a dossier of his crimes. It was what my grandmother would have called a vulture's nest, marrying into a good family just to pick it clean to the bone. The plan to devour an only child's family fortune. This wasn't just about abuse anymore. It was about a calculated, long-term conspiracy. While I handled the digital front, Frank embarked on his own reconnaissance mission. He had always been a master at blending in, at getting people to talk. His new routine was simple. Every morning he would go down to the building's state-of-the-art gym. Every afternoon he'd take a long walk in the park. He came back each time with little pieces of the puzzle. A chatty doorman told him that Marcus's previous fiancée, a woman whose existence we had been unaware of, hadn't just suddenly left. She had fled in the middle of the night with 2 suitcases, crying, and a friend had picked her up. A woman walking her dog in the park told him that Lila, Marcus's sister, had a reputation for shoplifting from local stores, and her mother always showed up to smooth things over. They weren't just cruel, they were fundamentally corrupt. By the 3rd day, I escalated our strategy. While Marcus was out at a client lunch, one, I'm sure, that involved a leather-bound menu and an exorbitantly priced bottle of wine, I enacted the final part of my plan. I had ordered them online the night before for same-day delivery, and they were sent to a pickup point a few blocks away. Frank and I worked with the quiet efficiency of a team that had been together for 40 years. He handled the technical side, his large, steady hands surprisingly nimble, a smoke detector in the living room, a USB charger in the kitchen, an alarm clock in the master bedroom. Each now housed a tiny, undetectable lens and microphone. We finished with 10 minutes to spare before Marcus came home. I stood in the middle of the enormous, silent living room, the city glittering beyond the glass walls. The apartment was no longer just his fortress, it was our listening post. The golden cage now had eyes and ears. The trap was set. We just had to wait for the rats to get comfortable. The shift in Riley didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual sunrise, a slow reclamation of abandoned territory. It started the morning after the cameras were installed. I came out of the guest room and found her in the kitchen, not making coffee, but on the phone, her voice quiet but clear. She was talking to a representative from a high-end organic meal delivery service. Yes, that's the one, she was saying. The post-recovery wellness package for 1 month to start. Please charge it to the credit card I have on file. She hung up and met my eyes. A small, defiant spark flickered in her gaze. He said I wasn't eating enough, she said, a faint smile on her lips. The first test came that afternoon. Margaret showed up at the door, violating our new rules, a casserole dish in her hand. She was trying to re-establish her dominance through the classic matriarchal Trojan horse: food. I brought my homemade lasagna, she announced, sweeping past me. It's full of iron, for Riley's recovery. She set it on the counter with a look of smug satisfaction. I knew for a fact that Riley hated ricotta cheese, a detail Margaret remembered with malicious precision. Riley came out of her bedroom. She looked at the dish, then at her mother-in-law, and gave a bright, fragile smile like spun sugar. Margaret, that is so thoughtful of you. Thank you. Margaret preened, thinking she had scored a point. But then Riley pulled out her phone. She took a photo of the lasagna, the rich, bubbling cheese, the artfully placed basil leaf on top. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated. A Facebook notification. Riley had posted to the extended Harris family group, a page Margaret had curated like a digital throne room. The photo was there, beautifully lit by the afternoon sun streaming through the apartment window. The caption read, "Feeling incredibly blessed. My wonderful mother-in-law, Margaret, just brought over her famous lasagna to help me get my strength back. Her love and support, and all this cheesy deliciousness, mean the world to me. Red heart emoji. Hashtag family first. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag recovery journey." It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Within minutes, the comments from aunts and cousins started pouring in. "You're such a wonderful mother, Margaret. Riley, you are so lucky to have her." Margaret was trapped. She couldn't admit the dish was a passive-aggressive swipe without revealing her own cruelty. She was forced to stand there and accept praise for an act of malice. I watched her face go pale. She left without another word. That small victory opened the floodgates. The next morning, the expensive organic meals started arriving in large insulated boxes. Marcus came out of his office to find Riley unpacking containers of quinoa salad with pomegranate seeds and cold-pressed kale juice. He saw the bill taped to the box, and his face filled with rage. "What is this?" he demanded. "My recovery diet," Riley said calmly. "Dr. Reynolds said I need to focus on my health." There was no Dr. Reynolds. She had invented her on the spot. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but he looked at me across the kitchen. He knew he couldn't do a thing. He was paying to make her strong, and it was eating him alive. Then came the music. The oppressive silence of the apartment was shattered. Riley resurrected her old Spotify playlists. The unapologetic, powerful voices of Beyoncé, Lizzo, and Adele filled the rooms, anthems of survival and defiance. She was reclaiming the very air of the condo. The final reclamation was the most symbolic. I walked past the master bedroom and saw Riley standing in front of her open closet. But she wasn't looking at her clothes. She was methodically taking Marcus's suits, shirts, and shoes and piling them neatly on her side of the bed. When the pile got too high, she started another on the floor. She completely emptied her half of the closet, leaving a huge vacant space. She was making room. The in-laws couldn't stand it. This wasn't the broken, obedient girl they had so carefully cultivated. The breaking point came on Saturday afternoon. The doorbell rang. It was Lila, and she had brought backup. Her husband, Derek, a man built like a refrigerator, stood behind her, his expression one of rehearsed menace. "We need to talk," Lila snapped, shouldering her way inside. Derek followed, slamming the door. You can't keep us from seeing our family. Marcus emerged from his office looking cornered. This was clearly a planned ambush. This has gone on long enough, Derek thundered, puffing out his chest. He took a step toward me. The old folks should get out of this house and let them work on their marriage themselves. Frank appeared from the guest room with a book in his hand, looking annoyed at the interruption. He was wearing reading glasses, which somehow made him look more imposing. There's nothing to work out, Frank said, his voice level. Derek laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. Yeah? Who's going to make me leave? You, Grandpa? He walked toward Frank, extending a meaty hand. Let's be reasonable. It was a classic alpha male gesture, a handshake meant to dominate. Frank took his hand. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I saw the confident smile fade from Derek's face. His knuckles went white. A fine sheen of sweat coated his forehead as Frank's grip, a silent vice of condensed power, steadily increased the pressure. Derek's bravado became a grimace of pure pain. He tried to pull away, but his hand was trapped. Frank stared him in the eye, his voice still calm. We should all just sit down, he said, releasing him just enough that Derek didn't shriek, and have a quiet chat about respecting boundaries. Derek could only nod, pale. He looked at his wife with pleading eyes. The muscle they had brought in had just been neutralized without a single punch being thrown. Lila looked at them both in horror. They had come to fight, expecting to intimidate a couple of retirees. They had run into a buzzsaw. Utterly defeated, they practically fled the apartment. I closed the door behind them and turned to see Riley standing in the hallway. She wasn't scared. She was watching Frank with awe. And then, for the first time since we had arrived, she smiled, a real smile. It didn't reach her eyes, but it was a start. The awakening was underway. The next few days were quiet, but it was the dense, charged silence of a storm gathering at sea. After Derek's humiliation, her in-laws stayed away. Marcus became a ghost in his own home, communicating only through slammed doors and the tense typing from behind his office door. He was a king who had lost control of his castle, and the tension was tearing him apart. He was about to snap, and we all knew it was only a matter of time before he did. It was time to turn up the heat. The plan was Riley's, and its elegant simplicity filled me with pride. On Tuesday evening, she was sitting on the white leather couch, her laptop open. I was in the kitchen, pretending to read a magazine, but I was watching her. She spent 20 minutes composing an email. When she was done, she called out to me. She had drafted a message to one of Chicago's most formidable divorce lawyers, a woman whose name was synonymous with scorched earth litigation. The email was a clear, concise summary of the last year: the financial control, the emotional abuse, the forced isolation, and the miscarriage. It ended with a simple, powerful line: I have gathered evidence and witnesses, and I am ready to start the process immediately. Okay, I said quietly. It's perfect. I'm going to make some tea, she said, her voice loud enough to carry down the hall to Marcus's office. She got up, stretched, and walked into the kitchen, leaving the laptop open on the coffee table, the screen a glowing beacon. The bait was set. 5 minutes later, the door to Marcus's office opened. He came out, heading for the built-in bar, his shoulders tense. He stopped, his gaze fixed on the glowing laptop screen. He glanced toward the kitchen, saw us busy with the teapot, and curiosity got the better of him. He walked over, craning his neck as he began to read. I watched his posture shift in real time. His shoulders hunched, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The mask of civilized control dissolved, replaced by a dark, narcissistic rage. He had been a predator, a manipulator, a thief. But the one thing his ego could not comprehend was the idea of being the one who was left. "What is this?" he hissed, spinning around to face Riley as she came back into the room. He pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "Are you leaving me? After everything I've done for you? After the life I've given you?" "A life?" Riley's voice was firm, imbued with a new strength that made him recoil. "You call this a life, Marcus? You erased me." "You ungrateful buck!" he roared. And this time there was no control or charm, just pure fury. He grabbed a heavy glass paperweight from an end table and hurled it against the wall, where it left a spiderweb of cracks in the drywall. "I made you. You were nothing before you met me." As if summoned by the sound of his rage, the elevator doors opened and Margaret stormed out. She must have texted her. She took in the scene, Marcus's fury, Riley's serene defiance, and her face hardened. "I knew it!" she shrieked, her voice a piercing siren. "I told you she was a gold-digging viper. You think you can just walk away from my son?" Marcus pointed at Riley, his face distorted. "She's trying to divorce me, Mum." Margaret laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Let her. You think you're getting a single cent? We'll bury you in court. We'll prove you're unstable, a cheat, a liar. You'll walk out of this with nothing but the cheap clothes on your back. Do you hear me? Nothing." There they stood, a united front of venom and vitriol, spewing insults at my daughter. They were so consumed by their own rage, so certain of their power, they didn't notice me slip out of the kitchen. They didn't see my small, serene smile. They didn't see me pull out my phone. I waited for Margaret to pause for a breath, her chest heaving with indignation. "That was quite a performance," I said, my voice cutting cleanly into her tirade. They both turned to look at me, momentarily stunned by the interruption. "I should know," I continued, holding up my phone, which showed the live feed from the camera disguised as the smoke detector above. "The ceiling camera has a fantastic microphone. It picked up every single word." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched them for a moment, taking in the reality of their situation. I watched the rage in their eyes turn to confusion, and then morph into a dawning, sickening horror. Their gazes lifted in unison to the small, innocuous white circle on the ceiling. It was no longer a smoke detector. It was the unblinking eye of judgment. "I think," I said, hitting the save clip button, "you'll find that the terms of the divorce are going to be a little different now." The silence that followed my revelation was the deepest I have ever witnessed. It was the sound of two monstrous egos imploding. Margaret's face, a moment before flushed with rage, was now a mask of horror, pale and slack-jawed. Marcus stared at the smoke detector as if he expected it to pass judgment on him right then and there. They had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and out-evidenced. Without another word, he turned, grabbed his mother's arm, and steered her toward the elevator, like a captain abandoning his own sinking ship. For a moment after they were gone, the three of us just stood there in the quiet apartment. Then, Riley let out a shaky sigh, a sound that was half sob, half laugh. We had won. The siege was over. We packed our bags that night, not with the frantic energy of a flight, but with the deliberate satisfaction of a victorious army abandoning conquered territory. We left Marcus's clothes piled where they were. We booked a suite at the Peninsula, a place of luxury and tranquility where we could decompress and plan our next steps with the attorney. Stepping out of the apartment and into that hotel was like leaving a war zone and entering a sanctuary. For the first time in a year, Riley slept straight through the night. The peace lasted less than 24 hours. The first missile dropped the next afternoon through a text to Riley's phone from an old college friend. "Oh my gosh, Riley, I know this can't be true. What's going on?" Attached was a link to a TikTok video. We huddled together on the plush hotel couch and pressed play. It was Marcus. The video was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. It started with a soft, sad piano track over a montage of their happiest moments, a smiling photo from their wedding, a video of them laughing on a sailboat. Then, the image blurred and Marcus appeared, sitting in what looked like our living room in Grand Rapids. He had stolen one of our family photos to use as a backdrop. He looked directly at the camera, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm not one to air my private life in public," he began, his voice thick with feigned emotion. "But my wife, Riley, the woman I love more than life itself, is in trouble. She's been seeing someone else." He let the line hang in the air. We found out she was pregnant, and I was so happy. I thought that would bring her back to me. But it wasn't my child. He held back a sob, an Oscar-worthy performance. She made a choice, a terrible choice to terminate the pregnancy, and I tried to support her. God, I tried. But her parents, they've never approved of me. They came in and twisted everything. They've taken her away from me. He looked at the camera, his eyes pleading. "Riley, honey, if you see this, please come home. I forgive you. We can get through this together." The video was 30 seconds long. It was a lie from beginning to end, a grotesque distortion of our reality. He had taken her miscarriage, a source of intimate pain, and turned it into a weapon, painting her as a faithless, murderous villain, and himself as the noble, forgiving saint. The video had gone viral. It had millions of views. And the comments were a tidal wave of pure, unfiltered hate. What a monster. Poor guy. Cancel her. Find out where she works. Someone needs to teach that whole family a lesson, especially that violent mother. His followers had already started. Our names, our faces, Frank's and my address in Grand Rapids, it was all being spread on Twitter and Facebook. Riley's phone, and then mine, began to buzz non-stop with notifications, each one a tiny drop of poison. Then came the calls, blocked numbers, people screaming obscenities and threats before we could hang up. It was a digital stoning. The final blow came an hour later. There was a polite knock on our suite door. It was the manager, a kindly-looking man, with an expression of profound professional regret. "Mrs. Miller," he said, avoiding looking at Riley. "I'm so very sorry, but we've been getting a great many calls. Some of our other guests have expressed concern for the hotel's reputation and their own safety." He wrung his hands. "We've had to notify security. I'm afraid I have to ask you to check out." We were being kicked out. We were being shamed. We were being evicted from our sanctuary because of a lie that was spreading faster than a wildfire. We packed our bags once again, this time in a stunned, humiliated silence. In the lobby, people stared and pointed. I saw one of them recording us on their phone. We were no longer people. We were the villains in a viral story. Back in the car, parked on a nondescript side street, Riley finally broke down. She put her hands over her face, her shoulders shaking with deep, agonizing sobs. He had found a way to hit her more brutally than any slap. He had taken her name, her story, her very identity, and set it on fire for the whole world to see. I put my arm around her, my heart cold and heavy in my chest. I had been so sure we had won. But Marcus was playing another game, one with no rules and no decency. He hadn't just declared war, he had tried to annihilate her. I looked at my daughter's shaking body and felt the fury return, a clean, cold flame that consumed my fear. I had forgotten something crucial. I had forgotten who her mother was. We didn't stay parked on that street for long. Despair is a luxury, and we couldn't afford it. "He's not winning," I said, my voice flat and hard. "He can't win." Frank started the car. "Where to?" "The Langham," I said. A five-star hotel that prioritized the privacy of its wealthy clientele above all else. They wouldn't care about a TikTok scandal. They would care about the validity of our credit card. As Frank drove, I made 2 calls. The first was to the Chicago police to report the doxing and the escalating harassment. The second was to our lawyer to tell him to prepare for a full-scale war. In the glittering, silent lobby of our new hotel, something shifted in Riley. The tears had stopped. Her spine, which had been bowed in defeat, began to straighten. As we settled into the new suite, she turned to me, her gaze clear and cold, with a determination I hadn't seen before. "He used his phone to ruin me," she said. "So I'm going to use mine to ruin him. I'm going live." For a second, I wanted to argue, to protect her. The internet was a cesspool, and she had been through enough. But then I saw her expression. This wasn't the broken girl from the hospital. This was a woman ready to fight for her life. This was her battle, and my job was no longer to stand in front of her, but beside her. "Okay," I said. "Let's get the evidence in order." For the next 3 hours, we worked. Frank, ever the strategist, set up her phone on a tripod, making sure the lighting was good and the connection was stable. I arranged our dossier of printouts and digital files on the coffee table. At 7 o'clock, Riley opened Instagram. Her hands were steady as she uploaded a simple text-based story. He told his side, "Now I'll tell mine," live at 8 p.m. Central Time. At 8 o'clock, she took a deep breath and hit the button. We watched the audience numbers soar. 1,000, 10,000, 50,000. The comments began to stream in, a cascade of pure venom. "Liar. Gold digger. Go cry somewhere else, you fraud." Riley ignored them. She looked directly into the camera, her expression calm and serene. "My name is Riley Miller Harris," she began. "And for the last year, I've been a victim of domestic violence. My husband, Marcus Harris, has told you a story. Now I'm going to show you the truth." She started by pulling up her shirt collar, showing the faint, yellowish bruise on her collarbone. "This is from 2 weeks ago," she said. Then she held a document up to the camera. "And this is a police report I filed 3 months after our wedding, the first time he hit me and caused a miscarriage. I was too scared and ashamed to tell my parents, a decision I'll regret for the rest of my life." The comments slowed for a fraction of a second. A few question marks appeared in the river of hate. "Marcus claims to be a loving husband, devastated by my choice. These are the security images from the nurses' station at Northwestern Memorial on the day my parents arrived." She shared her screen, and the grainy, soundless video played. It showed Marcus standing over her bed, the slap, my own furious entrance. The comments section exploded. "Whoa! Wait, he hit her in the hospital. What is going on?" "He claims I cheated on him and that he was supporting me financially," Riley continued, her voice growing stronger. She shared her screen again, this time showing the bank statements, the systematic draining of her savings. Then the credit card bills, with thousands of dollars of his spending on his suits, his car, his life. Finally, she showed the recurring payments, the thousands of dollars he had given to online streamers while claiming they were broke. The tide was turning, and it was turning fast. The hate was being drowned out by a growing chorus of outrage. #Justice for Riley began to pop up. But the worst lie, Riley said, her voice dropping, is that this was about love or about a baby. It was never about that. It was about money, specifically my parents' money. And then she played the last card, the grand finale. She shared the video from the hidden camera in the condo living room. The world watched a red-faced, screaming Marcus tell my daughter she was ungrateful. They saw Margaret shriek that they would leave her with nothing. They heard every word of their fury, their entitlement, their greed, captured in perfect high definition. The live stream exploded. The comments section was a maelstrom of pure, unadulterated fury, now directed exclusively at Marcus and his family. The hashtag was trending worldwide. Riley stopped the video and looked back at the camera, her face serene. My husband didn't lose a wife. He lost a target. I'm not a liar. I'm a survivor. She ended the live stream. The room was silent save for the frantic buzzing of our phones. Riley stepped away from the tripod, shaking with adrenaline. She looked at me, her eyes searching for mine. "Mum," she whispered, "did I do okay?" I pulled her into my arms, my heart swelling with a fierce, aching pride. "No, honey," I said, my voice thick with tears. "You were magnificent." The aftermath of the live stream was a digital tidal wave that reversed the one that had nearly drowned us. Our phones, which had been instruments of torture, now vibrated with overwhelming messages of support. Media outlets wrote articles, podcasts dissected the drama, and the company Marcus worked for, a prestigious wealth management firm, released a statement in less than 12 hours announcing his termination, effective immediately. The online streamers he had donated thousands of dollars to publicly condemned him, claiming they had no idea the money was stolen from his abused wife. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was unanimous and brutal. The legal proceedings, in contrast, were swift and discreet. Armed with our mountain of evidence, our lawyer was a shark in a wading pool. Marcus and his family, facing potential criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud and the very real threat of a domestic violence case, didn't put up a fight. They surrendered. The settlement was ironclad. Riley received every dollar they had taken from her, plus a sizable sum for damages. The divorce was fast-tracked. A strict restraining order was put in place, and our lawyer made it perfectly clear to Marcus's attorney that if any of Riley's private photos ever surfaced, he would personally see to it that Marcus was prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The last tether he had on her was finally severed. On our final day in Chicago, after signing the last of the documents at the lawyer's office, we were getting the car ready to drive back home to Michigan. Frank had gone up to the room to get our last bags, leaving me to wait in the hotel's underground parking garage. And then I saw him. Marcus was there, leaning against a concrete pillar, looking like a ghost. He must have been waiting for us. He looked terrible, gaunt, sallow, with dark circles under his eyes. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a wrinkled dress shirt. All the charisma and arrogance had drained away, leaving only the pathetic, hollow man beneath. Riley started, her voice hoarse as she saw me. "I just wanted to talk to her." "You forfeited that right," I said, my voice dangerously low in the echoing garage. "I'm ruined," he whispered, as if I should pity him. "My life is over." "You didn't ruin your life," I said, taking a slow step toward him. I looked around. The security cameras were positioned over the entrances and exits, leaving this section in a perfect, unblinking blind spot. "You set it on fire. I'm just the woman who gave you the matches." He flinched as I got closer. The intimidating, large man from the hospital was gone. I just saw a coward. "What you did to my daughter," I said, stopping directly in front of him. "The physical blows are one thing. But the slow, daily erosion of her soul is a debt that can't be paid with money. He just stared at me, speechless. I didn't hit him in the face. That would be too obvious. My blow was quick and low, a blunt, powerful punch, with my car keys clenched in my fist, aimed straight for the soft tissue above his hip. It was a move Frank had taught me a long time ago, designed to cause maximum pain with minimal evidence. He gasped, a wet, choked sound, and doubled over. As he folded, I brought my knee up hard, connecting squarely with his solar plexus. The air whooshed out of him, and he collapsed onto the dirty concrete floor, wheezing and gagging. I stood over him for a moment, breathing normally. I felt no rage, no compassion. I just felt balance. "Let this be the final payment," I told his gasping figure. Then I turned and walked back to our car without looking back. 6 months later, the scent of roses and wet earth filled my garden back in Grand Rapids. Chicago's raw winter had given way to the soft Michigan spring. I was pruning my prize-winning hydrangeas when I heard it, a sound I had feared I would never hear again, the sound of my daughter's sincere, unrestrained laughter. She was sitting on the back porch with Frank, a stack of textbooks and a laptop beside her. She had cut her hair, framing a face that was more radiant and vital than it had been in years. The settlement had given her independence, and she was using it to build a new life, one step at a time. She had enrolled in business courses at the local college and was working on a plan to open her own digital marketing agency for small, women-owned businesses. She wasn't the naive girl who had moved to Chicago, nor was she the hardened warrior from the live stream. She was someone new, someone who had walked through fire and learned she was fireproof. I watched her as she threw her head back and laughed again at something Frank had said, a smile that reached her eyes. She had been lost, buried under layers of fear and manipulation, but she had fought her way back. She had found herself again. My daughter was home. As for the Harris family, their reputation in their exclusive Chicago suburb was shattered beyond repair. Their story became a local cautionary tale of arrogance and cruelty. Margaret was rumoured to have become a recluse, and Marcus, the charming son with the bright future, found that no woman in the city would dare to go out with him. It was, in its own way, a life sentence. A fitting end for a family that had tried and failed to break mine.